20 years ago, Lamb of God released Ashes of the Wake. 20 years ago, what I've become. Exploding forth with inventive riffs like bullets from one gun. 20 years ago, the sands of the Hourglass are truly passing through. It contained politically charged lyrics, much like drawing blood from a scribe. That last one was a stretch, but still, Remorse is for the dead. This album saw the band cross the faded line from underdogs to rising stars. Hey Ben, Ben. I'm laid to rest. Later. Son of a bitch, I'm gonna break you. Now you've got something to die for. Omerta! Have I missed any? Another nail for your coffin was on the Japanese edition. Is it on the 20th anniversary edition? A version featuring Kubla Khan, TX and Malevolences. Another nail for your coffin. By the way, I know that I've got a woolen hoodie wrapped around my waist, but I'm metal as hell, I don't need to prove it. So, Lamb of God released Ashes of the Wake, 31st of August 2004. 20 years ago. Insane. This would be the band's third album, or fourth if you include Burn the Priest, and this was their first on a major label, this being Epic Records, that is, though the album is epic. This album was released at the peak of the new wave of American heavy metal explosion amongst bands like God Forbid, Trivium, Killswitch Engage, Chimera and Mastodon, who the band are touring with as I record this in America, as they are also celebrating their 20th anniversary of the phenomenal album Leviathan. For those of you who are interested, I'm going to be re-uploading my classic album review of Mastodon's Leviathan very soon as well. That'll probably be up on the channel already. From my old channel, I'm going to do a new introduction to it, but I thought that would be a good way of getting some of my classic album reviews back over to this channel. So look out for that one, if it's not there already. Now, it's safe to say that this album is packed full of political themes, most notably the Iraq War and the Bush administration, but it also does contain a lot of very personal, dark lyrics that really help you relate to the artists. The 20th anniversary edition doesn't actually contain that much extra that I'm interested in. As far as I can tell, it's not been remixed or remastered. It's got some of the same demo material that was on the 15th anniversary. It's got a live track and it's got a couple of remixes, none of which particularly blow my mind, but I am kind of interested in hearing the Justin K. Broderick remix of Omerta. And he's, of course, from Godflesh and Jesu. Huge fan of him, so I'd be interested to check that out, but I haven't had a chance to check it out at the time of recording, unfortunately. So this is actually going to be more of a retrospective album review as opposed to looking at the 20th anniversary edition itself. To be honest, I'm not actually sure I'm going to buy it because it doesn't actually... Maybe I shouldn't say that. Before we get into the tracks themselves, I just wanted to quickly mention the iconic artwork done by Ken Adams, who's worked with Lamb of God on many of their albums, if you look back through their discography. And in this case, the artwork depicts a horde of green and gold embossed skeletal birds hurtling through the air with bullets in their beaks. And this is, of course, in stark contrast to the usual peace doves that we'd think of who fly with olive branches in their beaks. Mark Morton had this to say about it. It's a really sophisticated piece. I remember Ken being particularly excited about the level of direct social commentary involved in the cover. As opposed to some of our other projects, this wasn't just something that we hoped would look cool as a cover. It was very much derived from the lyrical content and related directly to the album. And that brings us nicely onto the first track, Laid to Rest. I'm pretty sure at this point that any self-respecting metalhead or any fan of heavier music or guitar players will know this riff. It's just such an iconic riff at this point. It is, however, very, very similar to Testament's Into the Pit, which Mark Morton has acknowledged himself. But to be fair, I think they completely make it their own. The rest of the song, you know, sounds nothing like it, but just such an iconic opener, such an iconic track. How many people have picked up a guitar or wanted to learn this? I remember this as soon as I heard this song, as soon as I heard that intro, I wanted to pick my guitar up and learn how to play this straight away. That's the mark of a great riff right there. Lamb of God have always been masters at being able to take an insanely catchy hook but make it heavy and match it with dark, foreboding lyrics and an atmosphere. It's one of the reasons they've become so successful, in my opinion. And of course, Randy Bly delivers those classic lines. If there was a single day I could live, a single breath I could take, I'd trade all the others away. I've heard various different theories on what people think these lyrics are about, ranging from the Iraq War, of course, to a murder victim returning as a ghost to haunt their killer. I personally have always read it as somebody hurtling into alcoholism or drug use. Console yourself, you're better alone. Destroy yourself, see who gives a fuck. Absorb yourself, you're better alone. Destroy yourself. Now, this does make a lot of sense when you consider that it was Randy Blythe himself who wrote the lyrics for this one. He's been very public about his struggles with alcoholism in particular, but he had this to say. Laid to Rest is really a song about some personal stuff that I was going through at the time. It was cloaked in a lot of metaphor, so there's a duality to it, meaning people could interpret it to be about what was happening in the world at the time. That's a running theme throughout this album as well. Well, many albums, I guess. You can take the lyrics literally, or you can apply your own feelings onto them. That does work for a lot of this stuff. I'm rambling on. Laid to Rest, fantastic opener to an album. Iconic song, iconic riffs, iconic lyrics. Amazing. Next up we have Hourglass, and while I was researching for this review I found an interview with Mark Morton where he was saying he didn't want Laid to Rest to open the album, he wanted Hourglass to. Now, Hourglass is a fantastic song, be of no doubt, but I think they made the right decision with Laid to Rest. The music itself in this case was written by Willie Adler, and you can tell that straight away. It features his trademark angular riffs and really kind of complex off-kilter rhythms, while the lyrics appear to deal with a soldier who dies after going to war. The metaphor in this case is of a shattered hourglass, signalling that his time has run out, and not only that, it may have all been for nothing. You finally made it home, draped in the flag that you fell for, and so it goes, the ashes of the wake. Next up we have Now You've Got Something to Die For. This is another one with a very iconic, instantly recognisable riff. I seem to remember this being on a commercial for Vans shoes. I'm positive it was, but I couldn't find it anywhere. The only thing I found in reference to Lamb of God doing such a thing was actually the use of Pariah on, what was it, a DC Shoes Aerotech commercial. I'm positive it was. Is that the Mandela effect kicking in? Let me know what your thoughts are on that. I'm sure it was part of a Vans commercial. This is another one with an undeniable political bent to the lyrics. Bombs to set the people free. Blood to feed the dollar tree. Flags for coffins on the screen. Oil for the machine. What often saddens me with lyrics like these is how relevant they are today. It's quite often a thing with a lot of metal, punk and hardcore. A lot of those lyrics are talking about the incredibly bad times that are going on at the time they're recorded, and unfortunately nothing seems to have changed. Have you noticed that? Next up we have The Faded Line, and this one appears again to deal with addiction, and Mark Morton had this to say for himself. I've had a lot of veterans from this time period come to me and say how important this album was to them, to their time there, that this album was the soundtrack to their service. It's really one of the greatest honours for someone to say that, but this song stands out as one that I've heard about a lot in that context, probably because it's how Randy and I were perceiving the situation as outsiders. Now, once again, these lyrics could be taken in different ways, but it is worth pointing out that The Faded Line, I think, is actually a reference to addiction, an idea of crossing the line, so to speak, from good to bad, and that faded line is becoming somewhat of a grey area where you can't really tell the difference of where you are anymore. I'm wondering how many veterans saw or did too much when they were out serving their country and returned home and, had to deal with things in their own ways. Familiar touch, a ritual to numb the cut, salvation in vice, anguish in realising what could have been never was, it's emptiness that fills the cup. Whatever the true meaning of the lyrics on this one, it gives the listener a lot to ponder on. War sucks. Next up we have Omerta, and this is again another iconic one that many of you will have probably heard, no doubt, even if you're not a fan of the band. That iconic spoken word introduction from Randy Blythe, reciting the code of silence, I believe, from the Sicilian mafiosa. Whoever appeals to the law against his fellow man is either a fool or a coward. Whoever cannot take care of himself without that law is both. For a wounded man shall say to his assailant, if I live, I will kill you. If I die, you are forgiven. Such is the rule of honour. This song, like all of the others, is packed full of complex guitar riffs, but this was actually at a much slower tempo than a lot of the others. Mark Morton recalls this. What I remember about the song musically was that it was a very collaborative effort amongst the band. Willie brought in that main riff and the version was significantly faster. For some reason we decided to play at less than half speed. When we did that, it just kind of had a completely different kind of character altogether. This has always been a standout song for me. I absolutely love this one. Next up we have Blood of the Scribe, and the lyrics for this one were once again written by Randy, and this is one of the most ambiguous lyrical songs on the album. In my opinion. I got stumbled over my words there. On the one hand, the lyrics should be taken from the perspective of somebody who's just come to the end of the line and is ready to end it all. All this comes crashing down, cornerstones gone, sleepless, hopeless, no end in sight, inkwell has run dry, fill it with blood of the scribe. It could also, however, be an indictment of the brutal corporations and governments out there who just bleed us dry to fulfill their own needs, basically. Rest comes easy to the guiltless. The vampire laments as he prays for the sun. Doom, despair, tragedy are tools of the trade. Aren't they just? This song also has a much less conventional verse-chorus kind of structure that reminded me of some of their earlier material. Next up we have One Gun, and Mark Morton took the lead on this song, and you can hear that because it has that much more of a bluesy, slinkier, greasy feel to the riff. Apparently the lyrics to this one were inspired by the Nas song, One Mic, in which the rapper declared that he could change the world with just one mic. And Mark Morton went on to think, well, if you could change it with one mic, then you could certainly change it with one gun. So I'm assuming that this is a reference to an assassin. It's when murder is justice that martyrs are made. A one-gun salute for the new Independence Day. They'll hollow your name. They'll hollow your name for your sacrifice. It wasn't until I really started studying the lyrics for this review that it really hit home to me just how intense a lot of the lyrics are on this album. It's just truly brutal. It's only just occurred to me that I haven't even mentioned the incredible rhythm section of this band. Of course, Chris Adler was still in the band at the time, phenomenal drummer, and John Campbell on bass. It's quite often to forget just how good John Campbell is, because this is such a riff-centered band, and the riffs are so complex that it's easy to kind of just forget all about what else is going on. But he is actually mimicking a lot of these lines on the bass, so, you know, hats off to Mr. John Campbell. I'm starting to look like him now as well. In regard to the lyrics, this is pretty much a fuck you song from Randy. You taught me hate, I'll teach you fear. Open the eyes, kill despair. You tried to squeeze the life from me. Son of a bitch, I'm gonna break you. Fucking chill out. Next up we have What I've Become, and this is one of the simpler songs on the album, taking on a much more punk rock approach, which is very much to Randy Blythe's liking. The lyrics on this one, it would be very easy to take the lyrics on this song as a reflection on soldiers once again seeing too much in the war and the trauma that they have to deal with afterwards. But Mark Morton actually had this to say about it. Lyrically, it's about frustration with respect to intra-band relations. You're constantly at arm's lengths away from each other and things can get crazy. Any of you out there have seen the Philadelphia DVD will know that, yes, this band can indeed get in one another's faces. Blank stares of broken men, so withered from the poisons. They can't remember when there were once honest reasons. It's all a lie. It died 100,000 miles ago. Next up, we have one of the true standouts on the album for me, and that's the title track itself, Ashes of the Wake. This is essentially an instrumental piece with some incredibly complex musicianship going on throughout, and some incredible lead work from both Mark Morton and Willie Adler. However, they're also joined by Alex Skolnick of Testament and Chris Poland, most notably known from Megadeth. I know that these are two childhood heroes of both of the guitar players in the band, so they also contribute incredible lead playing. This is just an amazing track. But the real weight of this track, the real punch in the face, comes from the inclusion of snippets from an interview with Marine Staff Sergeant Jimmy Massey, who talked about his experiences or his thoughts, his opinions of his inclusion in the Iraq War. The main takeaway being, I honestly feel that we are committing genocide over there. I don't believe in killing civilians, and I'm not going to kill civilians for the United States Marine Corps. How deep can it get? I've already mentioned the intensity of the lyrics in this album, but the more you dig into it, the more you really study it and look into it, what they were doing with this album is truly incredible. And now we get to the final track of the album, Remorse is for the Dead. This one follows a similar song structure to one on the previous album closer, actually, Vigil, in which it starts out with a very melodic yet somber, clean guitar passage that lasts a good minute or so before the song really takes off and gets into the more aggressive side of things. And the lyrics in this song, at their most literal, are about a soldier doing exactly what they have to do in the heat of battle to survive. I don't hate you, I'm just removing an enemy. Remorse is for the dead. my enemy. Remorse is for the dead. Again, incredibly harsh lyrics and a stark reminder of the true atrocities of war, and it just never seems to stop. And there we have it, an album from a band at a stage in their careers where they were truly hungry, they were rising stars, they were starting to get noticed, and they were there to stake their claim. On the previous album, As the Palaces Burn, the band were all still working day jobs, trying to make it work, trying to make this their income, and on this album they did just that. It took them from being uprising stars into, well, I guess today's metal elite, really, when you look at it. This is a phenomenal album. It's rightly hailed as one of their best. This album is not only an incredibly important one for the band themselves, but for metal in general. Let me just have a quick look here. The album went on to debut at number 27 on the Billboard 200 and sold 35,000 copies in its first week. And at this point in time, I believe it's tied with Sacrament as their largest selling album. If you want to find out where it sits in my overall album ranking of the band, you may have already seen it, but I have an album ranking of Lamb of God on this channel already. And I talk more about it there. I do enjoy a lot of their later albums, and they've got some excellent songs that they write after this. I do truly believe that this was the band at their absolute creative peak. They were just firing on all cylinders on this album. It really shows. It stands the test of time. As I was just digging through it, it's just, every now and then you go through an old album and you really listen to it again and you just truly understand there was something magical going on at this time. Absolutely incredible album. The main thing that I took away from this, though, is that I can't believe it's been 20 years. 20 years of life has gone by that. Live life, everybody. It goes by very quickly. Seriously, you're leaving it like that? Fucking downer.